I see you from a new perspective, a higher place. In the 1960s, when I was much younger, believe it or not, my friends and I would spend the weekends looking for a hip joint to hang out in. And now, some 60 years later, I spend my weekdays looking for a hip joint. The times how they change, yeah? All right. So the title of my talk is, it's time for renewal. And I'll tell you how I came about that title. As after Reverend Erin called me and we visited for a bit, and I was thinking about what I wanted to use for a title. And the words came to me, the intuitive words came to me was, your talk is in the mail. Never heard that one before, you know. I mean, your check is in the mail, but never your talk is in the mail. So, talk is in the mail. Okay, so I went down, I got my mail, and I brought it up to my apartment. And I'm going through it, looking for my talk. And I found it. I found it on a postcard. Postcard said, it's time for renewal. How about that? I flipped it over, and it said, your subscription has expired. So that's my talk. It's time for renewal. Your subscription has expired. Really, that's it. So let me flesh it out a little bit for you. So a subscription is a contract, right? An agreement. And for a subscription to expire, it means it's no longer valid. Its time has run out. Well, let's just sort of do a metaphysical piece on this. If we look at subscriptions, we look at agreements, and we, of course, have legal agreements, but we also have soul agreements, and those are the agreements that last much longer and go much deeper than the legal agreements. So we all have various levels and types of soul agreements, contracts, if you will, subscriptions, if you will. And sometimes they expire. So then it's time for renewal. So the thesis of my talk here is that renewal comes from letting go of old contracts, letting go of old agreements. Renewal does not come about when we pile on more on top of the old if we haven't let go of the old, you see. So let's start right from the scratch. The first agreement we have is that our soul agrees to come into this physical world. The fact that we're all here, I think you would agree with me, or your soul would anyway. We make a contract to have a physical body. So the soul agrees to subscribe to a physical body until it expires. And that's a very important contract that we have. Because the soul is non-physical. So it's kind of like a human astronaut going to Mars. It needs a suit. It needs something to survive in an environment that's not its own. So when the soul comes into the physical realm, it creates structures to support itself. These are physical structures, the body, and also mental structures, belief systems, identities. These are all structures as well. So when we look at our life experience, we see we've got a physical structure, but what are some of the other structures that we've created, our soul has created or subscribed to? family. Family system is a structure, right? Family system is a structure that shapes our identity. And that identity stays with us for a long time. Now, the family system helps us survive, and yet at the same time, there's a point in time when we need to release that family system. I don't mean we have to always say goodbye to the people, but to the system itself, to the agreements. We all made agreements in our family that perhaps are outworn, because if they aren't released, that can be problematic, okay? Likewise, we have agreements as we get older with our peer group, with our schools, and ultimately with our culture. We have an agreement. Our culture creates us, we create the culture. So our soul is like a Russian doll. It has several layers to it, several nested eggs. So it's very interesting to think about the soul like a chicken. I'll bet I'm the first time you've ever heard that in a unity talk. Think of the soul as a chicken. The chicken creates a shell, creates an egg. The egg then creates a chicken, which in turn creates an egg, which in turn creates a chicken, which in turn, okay? So maybe that's called reincarnation to the chicken, I'm not sure. But the shell is a structure that holds the development of the chicken, right? If it wasn't for the shell, the chicken couldn't survive. And yet the time comes when the chicken needs to break that shell apart and let it go. If the chicken stays in the shell too long, what's going to happen to it? It's going to die, right? It's going to stagnate. If it breaks out too quickly, what's going to happen? The chicken won't survive. So think of all of the shells and the structures in your life. Schools, marriages, careers, belief systems, this group, that group, whatever we identify with, whatever we consider me or us. You see, who is the us? Who is the we in your life? Who is the we in your life? We, me, my spouse, my family, my country, whatever it may be, you see. So the chicken creates the shell, the soul creates the structures nurture the soul, just like the shell nurtures an egg. And then when the time comes, the shell needs to be broken. But if we hold on to the shell too long, there's no renewal, there's stagnation. Renewal comes when we allow that shell to break at just the right time. Just like the chicken needs to break out of that shell at just the right time. Too soon doesn't work, it won't survive. Too late doesn't work, it won't survive. So timing is everything. Ancient wisdom points this out many places. The Taoists talk about it. And in the Hebrew Bible, there is the book of Ecclesiastes 3. I'll ask the ministers what that is. You all know it. There's a time for everything under the sun. A time to be born, a time to die, a time to plant, a time to harvest, and so forth. So there's the timing of our life cycles. Very, very important. There's another piece of ancient wisdom that comes from the riverboat gambler. You know him? You got to know when to hold him, you got to know when to fold him, exactly. So that's another way to put it, a little more poetic. Knowing when to hold on, knowing when to let go. Knowing when to let go of our family system, knowing when to let go of the old gang on the street corner, knowing when to let go of old belief systems, old religions, old churches, etc., you see. Renewal is when we let go at just the right time. So, little experiment. I invite you to take a deep breath, breathing in. I'd like you to breathe in again. I'd like you to breathe in again. Then I'd like you to let go. Feel the renewal? The renewal doesn't come with breathing in, does it? The renewal comes when we exhale, when we let go. That's the release. That's the renewing. We are made new when we release at the right time. Every breath needs to be balanced. Every in-breath needs to be balanced with an out-breath, and vice versa. So, for you ministers out there, us ministers out there, I should say, we all recall the time when our former career became like the eggshell, and the egg inside was knowing something was not quite right. Divine discontent. I want to do something with my life, but I don't know what it is. This is not working for me anymore, et cetera, you say. So there's that period of just discomfort. And then there's a period of deciding. And then once we decide, there's a period of breaking out of that old shell and entering into the new one. And sometimes we'll move into the new structure, and we haven't totally let go of the old. There was a time in my life when I was raised Catholic, by the way, and I was Catholic for about 20 years, and then I left the church, physically left the church. 10 years later, I began to develop some serious headaches, debilitating headaches. They were causing me lots of trouble. I almost had to leave my job as a result of them. So I was very concerned. And fortunately, I discovered a self-awareness center, and through the work in that self-awareness center, I realized what was going on. Even though I was moving on into a new spiritual dimension in my body, in my mind, there was a part of me that was still holding on to the Catholic Church. Some old guilt. Because those of you that have been raised Catholic, you know that you're Catholic not for 20 years, but for how long? Forever. You see, that's the programming we get. That loyalty. And so those structures die hard. So it's very important to recognize that we need to let go when we need to let go. Why do we hold on to outmoded structures? You know, if we need to let go of them, why don't we just let go of them? Well, the answer comes from a very wise saint known as Shel Silverstein.
Yes.
You know Shel, don't you?
Oh, yes.
All right. He's the author of children's books.
Oh, yes.
And here's one of his favorite poems. He writes poems too. It's The Chicken That Refused to Hatch. Remember that one?
Yes.
Oh, I am a chickie who lives in an egg. Kids out there? I am a chickie that lives in an egg, but I will not hatch. I will not hatch. The hens, they all cackle. The roosters all beg, but I will not hatch. I will not hatch. For I hear all the talk of pollution and war, and the people all shout and the airplanes roar. And I'm staying in here where it's safe and it's warm. I will not hatch. I will not hatch. And what happened to that egg that refused to hatch? right? Begins to smell bad after a while. That happens in our own life, right? Things don't smell right. That's when it's time to let go. So it takes a constant awareness to know when to hold them and fold them, if you will. It may feel safe to hold on, but it doesn't work. That's where dysfunction comes from. I think every psychologist, counselor will tell you dysfunctional behavior, dysfunctional relationships come when we hold on to our old life too long, from holding on to the past. And so psychotherapy consists 95% of letting go, discovering where we're holding on, and then letting go. Sometimes when we let go of a structure, we're not quite ready for another one. We feel like we're between structures. That's when we find ourselves in transition. There's a book written, I think by that title. I don't remember who the author is, do you? Nobody? Kind of dark. It used to be dark hair anyway. Right. He's still looking for a hip joint, you know. So yeah, sometimes we find ourselves in transition when we release one structure and the other structure isn't quite ready for us. And we feel like we're alone. We feel like we're very maybe naked psychologically, you know. It's like we don't have a sense of purpose or a sense of direction. We don't have the old familiar structures to hold us. A lot of people in retirement experience that. You see, there's lots of ways when we let go of the old. We're not quite ready for the new yet. So I'd like to close with this particular poem from Rumi, one of my favorite poets. If you're not familiar with Rumi, R-U-M-I, I sure encourage you to do so. He writes, I died as a mineral, and I became a plant. I died as a plant, and I rose to an animal. I died as an animal, and I became a human. Why should I fear? When was I made less by dying? Why should I fear? When was I made less by dying? So peace and blessings to each of you. Thank you for your presence. Thank you for your open-hearted listening. Be well. We shift now into our meditation, where we take the ideas into our heart. So I invite you just to imagine you're dropping into the soul level. And a good way to do that is to focus on your breath. And with each in-breath, you're taking on something new. With each out-breath, you're letting go of something old. Just notice how that feels. Notice that there must be a balance between in-breath and out-breath. Notice that it's uncomfortable to hold on to an in-breath too long. Notice that it's uncomfortable to not take an in-breath in time. The very life of our body depends upon this rhythm. Breathing in breathing out. The rhythm must be balanced. All life in this universe must be balanced. The universe itself must be balanced. Your soul must be balanced. Letting go, opening up to what's new. Our work is to be willing to let go when it's appropriate and being willing to say yes when it's appropriate. And the more we meditate, the more we listen to the inner wisdom, the more often we will know when to take in, when to let go, when to say yes, when to say no, when to release, and when we're ready for a new birth. Just rest in the peace of that knowing. Let the breath be your teacher as we rest in that silent knowing of this sacred truth. Breathing in, breathing out. We become aware of our body, feeling gratitude for the body. It's not ours to own. The soul is just leasing it. Nothing is ours to own. Everything is being borrowed. Receive with joy. Let go with joy. Celebrate the knowing that you know when and how. And so it is. I invite you to gently open your eyes. Stay with your breath. Stay with your heart. And let yourself feel renewed this beautiful spring, summer day. We say thank you, Spirit, for this priceless opportunity to come together, to love each other, and to know the truth. And amen.